Then I took a smidge and applied it down there.
This one's wife. Fraud. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The word fraud rather hangs around this one's wife like a bad smell, and it does so for a multiplicity of reasons which are worth examination. Firstly, there was the instance where this one's wife, as part of a Q&A at the ATX festival, stated, "I was such a fraud," where she had admitted that she had pretended to be in an actors' union at an audition for a television pilot called Century City. I'll come back to that in a moment. Secondly, she's often regarded as a fraud because so much of what she does is acting. And thirdly, there are suggestions that there have been some financial chicaneries undertaken by this one's wife, which could be described as fraud. Returning to the admission that she made, because that's quite useful to examine. This is not a genuine admission by her that she knows that she is a fraud as a whole, but rather that her narcissism enabled her, in that moment, to use the recollection of duping somebody in a manner which showed that she didn't care the first time around, that she didn't care about making the admission, and that she actually finds it funny, and that her narcissism saw fit to make this admission in the purposes of a Q&A, for the purposes of asserting control over the audience, believing they would be amused by it also. The fact that she pretended to be in an actors' union in the first place is hardly a surprise. Not just narcissists might engage in such a behaviour. Non-narcissists could do so if the circumstances meant that they saw that there was some gain and that their moral compass was suitably bent out of shape, or simply wasn't strong enough, that they would engage in the behaviour. But for a narcissist, it's almost a given that such a lie would be told, and she did so in order to nullify the threat to control at the audition, so that she could potentially gain a benefit, a residual benefit, of an acting job. The question, "Are you in an actors' union?" threatens her need for control. She therefore says, "Yes, I am," to nullify it, even though it's not true. In the Q&A at the ATX festival, she needs to assert control over the audience. And so what does she do? Her narcissism brings up the past by recalling an instance where she told a lie, and then she repeats the lie and shows that she doesn't care about lying, demonstrating the absence of emotional empathy and moral compass. Thus, her fraudulent behaviour isn't a genuine admission, it's utilised by her narcissism for the purposes of assertion of control in that moment, using a prior instance of her behaviour. Collateral consequence, it demonstrates that she's a liar and is indeed a fraud. But her narcissism doesn't care about that. All it cared about was asserting control by way of getting a laugh and some fuel at the ATX festival when she made this admission. With regard to the second aspect of her being a fraud, this appertains to the fact that so much of what she does isn't genuine. And as you know from my extensive work, that is central to the existence of the narcissist. So much of what this one's wife does is performative, driven for the purposes of the pursuit of the prime aims, and isn't actually genuine. When she helps somebody, it isn't because she actually wants to help them, it's because it helps her assert control over them and draw fuel from them by way of their response, and if it's witnessed by many people, it helps manage her facade. And we have another instance of her fraudulent behaviour across a number of ways. The photograph that you can see on your screen was posted on this one's wife as ever Instagram account. She hasn't really done much on that Instagram account, but has started to galvanise postings on that site a little more just recently. And here we have a picture taken by persons unknown from above, presumably in part of the grounds at Monty Shit Show, which shows this one's wife strolling along, barefooted, alongside some vegetables that are growing, so it looks like she's in the vegetable patch. She has her hat on, She's casually dressed. She carries a watering can and some spring onions. There are 3 aspects of her fraudulent behaviour that jump out. Can you spot what they are? Well, first of all, look at the fact that she's barefooted. Who the fuck goes walking around gardens barefooted? There's a gravel path there which would be uncomfortable to walk on, hence why she's walking on the bricks of the wall, which is ridiculous as well. Who strolls around a garden walking on the wall? A child. Oh yes, this one's wife, in effect, is one. But also bear in mind, this is the woman that would wander around barefoot in a kitchen. So, is it the case that she wanders around outside and then tramps in all the various germs, etc., that collect on the bottom of her feet into a kitchen where she's handling food? Shows that she's something of a fraud when it comes to operating in a kitchen, doesn't it? Because hygiene is one of the most paramount aspects of anybody that works or delivers in a kitchen, and it should be doubly so in respect of an individual who is having a cookery show. Hygiene is paramount. And yet here we have the Sasquatch with her massive feet wandering around, supposedly outside. This is a fraud, because the fact is she doesn't regularly walk around outside barefooted, but she's created this image to show that she's carefree, that she's fleet of foot. Look at me, walking around in the sunshine in my bare feet. The second fraudulent aspect of this is, look at her skin. Looks like the bronzer was forgotten on this day. Her feet, particularly her arms, and less so but still evident her upper chest area, all look rather white to me. This, for a person who regularly holds herself out as a person of colour, certainly tells us that, well, there's some more fraud going on here. That on other occasions, when she looks browner, it's clearly as a consequence of the application of bronzer. Here, we see her in her natural state, which is she looks white. And then the third aspect of this fraud is one that you may have picked up on previously, is in her right hand. No, not the watering can, but the spring onions. They look suspiciously clean, don't they? Now, I'm no gardener. I find the topic quite frankly boring. But I do know from watching my father when I was a young boy, and generally watching people on television undertaking gardening when I've had to endure that, or being around individuals that are engaging in the gathering of vegetables and such like, that when they come out of the ground, be they spring onions, carrots, potatoes, they generally have something attached to them, linked to the fact that that's where they've been growing. Yes, soil. That's why, when you grow your own, one of the things that you have to do is spend some time washing your fruit under a running tap to get rid of the soil, the earth that has accumulated upon them. They do not appear pristine. They do not appear as clean as they do in this picture. Look at those spring onions. There isn't one crumb of dirt on them. There isn't a speck of soil. There isn't an ounce of earth attached to them. Those are quite clearly shop-bought spring onions. This one's wife, demonstrating her fraudulent behaviour again, to make it seem as if she is this accomplished gardener. She isn't. Either her spring onions are shit, or that they might be decent, but in order to get the picture, what she does is try to convey this image of her being a brilliant gardener, using fresh grown vegetables in her culinary creations. And here she is, barefoot, bronzer-free, earth-free spring onions on display, strolling through the garden, and just happens to be photographed so she can then place that on her Instagram for the purposes of assertion of control and drawing of fuel. In the same way that we saw that the popcorn was likely to be shop-bought because the wrapper was left on the counter, so much of this one's wife and her activity is not genuine. This is because she's a narcissist. The reason that she engages in this fraud is, first of all, she wants to portray an image to the outside world. Now, plenty of people do that. It's often talked about how on social media there is a world of difference between how it looks at that person's life and how it actually is. But for this one's wife, the projection of that image is all important because as a narcissist it allows her to assert control over an audience and draw fuel from them by way of a response. It's also done to bolster the facade of suggesting that she's a competent gardener and cook. Furthermore, as a narcissist, she doesn't give a rat's ass about the truth. She's a stranger to the truth. Her lies are her truth. She doesn't care that she's misrepresenting what she's doing. She doesn't give a rat's ass because of her sense of entitlement means she's allowed to do whatever she wants. She has no sense of accountability because accountability acts as a shackle upon her need for control. So what do you get? You get the barefooted Duchess of Delusion, tan-free, bronzer-free, strolling through the gardens, ensuring that she's photographed, carrying some shop-bought spring onions to try and tell the world, these are mine and I grew them and picked them today. Once again, because of the dislike that exists for this woman and her overexposure, plenty of people will have noticed that this is the case because everything that she posts receives such scrutiny. People will have identified that there is no earth on the spring onions, meaning that this is another example of her fraudulent behaviour. Yet here we are, with an Instagram post, yet again going to Instagram, where there are 3 instances of fraud exhibited by this one's wife. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.